How are you doing today? Is that all right?
All as well. Good to see you, even if virtually, Zikica.
Yes, yes. Too bad, too bad. Long time no see, definitely. Well, I believe from this spring we'll start communicating and having meetings normally. So I guess we'll see each other at least in April. That's my plan, actually.
I think
to
we're
start.
entering a new phase in combating this pandemic, and I really hope that the current efforts, global efforts, succeed into returning us into normality, step by
Yes,
step.
yes. So I have some questions for you. Welcome to Diplomacy Talks. This is going to be a new Zoom video podcast. And first question is, Egypt and Serbia have had excellent political relations from the era of both kingdoms, and the Yugoslav king took refuge in Cairo for a while. After a short period of cooling during the rule of Muslim Brotherhood, we are once again here in excellent relations. How do you assess the relations between the two countries?
Well, first of all, congratulations, Zikica, for this new initiative of launching diplomacy and commerce through online virtual meetings. I think, as I always say, in every crisis is an opportunity, and in this pandemic crisis, there was an opportunity to adapt to new methods of work, including for the very traditional diplomacy, which usually retains to its long inherited traditions and protocols. But I think we managed to discover and explore new approaches, new methods, and probably this meeting is one of the first in this regard. So congratulations for this new initiative. Your question, I think, is a very pertinent one, because we do enjoy a very solid foundation of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Cairo was the first seat of any Serbian envoy in Arab world and in Africa, and that has spurred the activity of diplomacy, but diplomacy in the wider sense of the term, meaning economic, commercial, cultural relations, and other forms of relations between the two countries. So the relations are now at probably one of its peaks. We've had 3 active years of cultural relations, in particular, a very important aspect of diplomacy that is gaining more and more ascendancy in today's world. We've had also a very noticeable and notable exchange of high-level visits, including at the level of ministerial and speakers of parliaments from both countries. I believe this particularly 2021 will culminate this spur of activities that took place at high levels through a number of concrete memorandum of understandings and agreements, and maybe through a number of concrete mechanisms, joint mechanisms meetings. So I'm happy to share with you that hopefully in 2021, the first joint economic committee between the two countries will be convened after maybe 10 or 11 years of pause. Also, the first joint business council will be convened on the margin of that particular mechanism. So I really hope that 2021 will be the year of commerce, the year of business, the year of economic relations. Hence, it's very good to speak to diplomacy and commerce. So this year is diplomacy and commerce for Egypt and Serbia.
Great. So many good plans. So I hope they will be fulfilled. So the second question could be, we have seen the renaissance of Egyptian tourism after the Arab Spring, and I would like to know how much the Serbian tourists contribute to the Egyptian tourism, and we've seen this loyalty of Serbian tourists to Egypt even during pandemic. How do you comment that?
You know, I like your use of the term loyalty, Zikica, because this is very much the characteristic that I have discovered in Serbian tourism to Egypt. You know, when I first came January 18, 2018, so exactly 3 years almost in the week, exactly 3 weeks by week from today. The first activity that I organized next month, which was in the following month, which was in February at the Belgrade Tourism Siam, was that I asked my colleagues at the embassy to open their book reading, their book records, and to see who are the 5 tourists who have received the highest number of visas in the last 5 years. And I told them, please, I want this to be totally objective. Don't ever suggest or nominate family or friends or even other loyal travelers, but I really want it to be an objective exercise of bookkeeping or book record. And we did find 5 visitors who received the highest number of visas, and we offered them 5 trips to Egypt, and they chose actually to come back with their families or friends. And you would never imagine, first of all, the feeling of happiness that that's a totally unexpected prize like this could come up to them when we phone ring them on the phone, and then they told them, well, you got a surprise prize to visit Egypt again. But I was equally surprised. Some of these tourists, Zikica, had been to Egypt in the last maybe 5 or plus years for 30 times. Can you imagine going to one country 30 times in the span of 5 or sometimes 10 years? What does this mean? It means that this is what we call in the tourism industry retained tourists, retained visitors. And that is never a result only of good promotion. It's never a result of advertising. It's never only a result of featuring. It's a result of satisfaction. The only way a tourist would go back for 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 times is if that visitor was satisfied. And this is the strongest ever promotion. It's the promotion of satisfaction, not a promotion of advertisement, not even a promotion of campaigning, not even a promotion of affordability. It's a promotion of satisfaction. And those loyal tourists whom you call are very much value that we cherish at the embassy and in Egypt.
I have on my wall behind me, there are photos of me around the world, and the 2 of the photos are from Egypt. Actually, both are actually from Giza. One with the pyramids, and the other one is with the Sphinx. So it was a special thing when I first went there.
The cultural tourism that you're now featuring is a very important dimension and aspect of tourism to Egypt. This particular year, 2021, promises a number of leaps, should I call it so, in culture tourism, because the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, actually, I think correctly called the GEM, is going to be opened this year. Also, there's another new museum that is going to be opened this year. It's called the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and it's a museum that is almost the mirror image of the GEM. The GEM is the largest museum in the world dedicated to one civilization, which is to ancient Egypt. It doesn't deal with Greco-Egypt or Roman Egypt or Coptic Egypt or Islamic Egypt or Ottoman Egypt, not at all. It deals with ancient civilization, and that's the largest museum in the world. The other museum that I just mentioned, which is the Museum of Egyptian Civilization, is the opposite. It tracks Egypt through different phases and stages of its history. So the 2 combine very well. But also, I'm happy to share with you, and maybe for the first time to many of our viewers and listeners, is that even the areas which were dedicated more or less for resort tourism, which basically one would go and enjoy the sun and the sand for a week. Now there have been an opening of the Hurghada Museum. It was just opened a few months ago, also tracing Egyptian civilization from ancient Egypt to the time of Muhammad Ali, the founder of modern Egypt. There is also in new museum in Sharm el-Sheikh and in a number of other resort cities, so that the traveler who is going for resort tourism would actually also get a taste of the country by visiting those museums. So I really invite our Serbian tourists who are very loyal, as you said, to explore at least the Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh museums, because it will really complete and complement their cultural experience of visiting the country.
These are fantastic things to hear. Congratulations for the efforts. I'm really impressed. Really, next time I can go to Hurghada, I will definitely try to make it as soon as possible. I will definitely see the museum. Great. It changes every time. I've been there in 2010 in April, and then in January 2019, and it changed a lot. I mean, the mosque in the harbour, and everything was really on the very next level. You know, not to mention the new capital. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Now, a little bit more about tourism.
I'm happy to, the chairman of Color Media, Mr. Robert Choban, did actually visit the Museum of Hurghada just last week, and he did it on his own. I didn't even have time to recommend that to him. So it really shows how this is now being featured in any visits to the Red Sea and to Hurghada, is to visit the museum as well as enjoying the beach and the sun.
Absolutely. We saw the photos that he posted on Facebook. So we pretty much follow his endeavors everywhere in the world, and it was one of the things that I noticed most. So a little bit more about tourism. In 2019, we've seen the boost in charter flights of 55% between the two countries. And in 2020, there was an estimation of further 50% increase. But then the pandemic happened. Nevertheless, the tourists from Serbia went to Egypt very frequently in 2020. Egypt is the third most preferred destination of Serbian tourists. What do you think there of the fields of the potential growth in 2021, and especially when the pandemic is absolutely and totally over? What parts of Egypt, what can we do to make it more attractive, if it's possible? I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Zikica. Now, of course, 2020 was a challenging year for the tourism industry, for the civil aviation industry, and I would actually add for the cultural industry as well, because these are three activities whereby physical presence is very much an essence, an essential component of it. But it's nice that let's track and see the increase in interest in visiting Egypt by Serbian tourists. So when I came in 2018, there was about 28,000 tourists. So 2019, it doubled to 36 probably. And then in 2000, so yes, beginning of 2018, we were at the 20s. Beginning of 2019, we were at the 40s, and then beginning of 2020, we were at 68 to 70, which means that each year we've been doubling. Since 2018, each year the number of Serbian tourists to Egypt have been doubling times 2, which is a really big rate of increase. 2020 happens, and with the pandemic, so obviously the numbers will not double, but more important in 2020 is not to measure how the numbers have increased, but how at least they have compared to other tourists, outgoing tourists from other areas in the world. And Serbian tourists remain to be the number 3, or became the number 3 in terms of the total number of tourists to Egypt in 2020, which again is a reflection of how loyal Serbian tourists have been. Especially when we see that in the 3 or 4 months after the tourism industry has resumed, which I think is since July 15th of 2020, in the 3 or 4 months of summer, the number of tourists was almost equal or higher to the same season the year before. And the reason for that is that Egypt has never closed its borders to Serbian tourists. I know that Serbian tourists may have land destinations that are close by, but those land destinations were not available during 2020. Egypt continued to have its borders open. And that again is a reflection of how strong the friendship between the two countries is, how important this interaction through tourism is. When you say that Egypt is the number 3 top destination of Serbian tourists, I beg to differ a little bit. Why? Because in terms of size and numbers, it may be so, but we are comparing different types of tourism. When you go to tourism by land transport, or even going to a summer resort that a family may own in a neighboring country, it's hard to compete with that when the tourism destination is by definition has to be by air. So I think the number one destination of any Serbian tourist, if he or she chooses to board a plane, is actually Egypt. If he or she choose to
Yes.
take a car and take the family and go to a summer house that they own, then we can compete with that. And I'm very, very proud of this, that it is the number one air tourism destination, and I have full confidence that this will be not only will be maintained, but even will be expanded more through the number of culture projects that are taking place, that we mentioned some of them, and through two new phenomena that we are introducing in Egypt as a tourism destination. One is ecotourism, and I would really like to invite you and our listeners to visit Eco Egypt Experiences, and on Instagram and on Facebook, which is this new dimension of tourism that Egypt is launching for individual travelers who would like to go and explore by bike or by hike, who would like to merge with the nature in the seas or in the Sahara. And that new product, should we call it so, I think is going to very much also fit and suit well with the interests of Serbian tourists. The other new phenomena that is being introduced is the merger of culture tourism with resort tourism. We mentioned one, which is having those new museums in resort cities, but also a number of joint excursions that are available now, more so when you visit when one visits resort tourism. So a day trip to Luxor is becoming a very easy activity to do from Hurghada, but also a day trip to Cairo is actually also doable, and that makes sure that the tourist gets the very valuable historical experience of visiting ancient Egyptian antiquities, which I think is actually is almost like a necessary homework for all of us, because when we look at ancient Egyptian civilization, we're looking at ancient civilization full stop. It's the ancient civilization of the world, how basically the world developed its science, how the world developed its architecture, how the world developed even its social construction of religion and state and society and so on and so forth. So visiting one of these temples or one of these sites is literally an immersion into one's own evolution, one's own history, by discovering those aspects. So I think those two things, ecotourism, Eco Egypt Experiences .org or on Instagram, and a merger of culture and resort tourism are really going to be 2 points of attraction for 2021 and beyond.
In January 2019, we visited the St. Anthony's Monastery near Hurghada and St. Paul's Monastery, and it was a fantastic thing that I think we both implanted into this visit. I was really thrilled. You mentioned the undiscovered gems of the Mediterranean coast, which could be the next stop, next favorite place for the tourists from Serbia and around the world. Beautiful Alexandria. Will we open that door soon, anytime soon?
So these are two important, also additional dimensions that I'm happy we're exploring together. First of all, we were talking about the merger of this culture tourism with resort tourism. The two monasteries that you mentioned are in the Red Sea Governorate, which means that they're also I'm happy you mentioned those two aspects, because they're very important to discover. We were talking about the merger of culture tourism with resort tourism. The The Saint Anthony Monastery that you mentioned is in the Red Sea Governorate, which means that it's doable in a one-day trip from Hurghada, which is the number one destination for Egyptian tourists. So by visiting Hurghada and enjoying the sea, you can also visit the oldest monastery in the world, especially when the visits are in times of religious festivities, such as Christmas at the end of the year, or even Easter by the beginning of spring. And I've visited so many beautiful monasteries in Serbia, and I know how embedded the phenomena of monasteries is in the rich Serbian culture. And that is why I really invite our visitors to explore that, also that dimension of visiting the two monasteries, especially that they are in the Red Sea, and then see how the whole concept of priesthood, how the whole concept of monasteries has evolved all around the world. But this is in the Red Sea Governorate, which actually, I would say, I would share a secret maybe with you, Jika. It's our winter outing. It's our winter resort or so, because in Hurghada and even beyond in the south, you can swim even on New Year's Eve. In fact, we did that. We had a very interesting, we had a very valuable trip by a number of diplomatic representatives and their families who spent New Year's Eve in Egypt, and it was a swimming New Year's Eve, more or less. So this Red Sea for us as Egyptians is mainly a winter getaway. Now, for Egyptians, the summer getaway is into another sea that we very luckily enjoy in Egypt, which is to the Mediterranean Sea. Alexandria, of course, is the cradle of that sea, the oldest, the biggest city on the Mediterranean. However, we as Egyptians started to explore west of Alexandria. So now there is a mega project of building the new capital of Mediterranean called El Alamein, which is the site of the famous El Alamein battle of the Second World War, with the turquoise waters and the white sands. That is what differs what makes the Mediterranean different from the Red Sea, where it's yellow sand and more bluish waters. The Mediterranean on that part of the coast is white sand and turquoise waters. So with Al Alamein and west of Al Alamein is a total new discovery of the sea and water experience in Egypt. And I would very much suggest that this be also an exploration for the tourists in summer. So in winter, one can spend the New Year's Eve swimming, and then in summer, the same thing on the Mediterranean with a very different experience. We hope that Air Serbia will resume once again its flights to Cairo, because from Cairo to the Mediterranean is a much closer trip, easily doable by train or by car. There are a number of highways that have been constructed recently that are just superb. In fact, in the last 3 years, I think there's been 12,000 kilometers of new highways being constructed, making it the biggest leap of infrastructure in our modern history, or maybe even in our in history in general. So for the summer, the Mediterranean, El Alamein and Alexandria can be very much the preferred destination for tourism related to the seas and the beaches.
I hope we will make some press tour to the northern coast and Mediterranean coast, because I'm eager to see that. I'm really fascinated with the very idea of Alexandria from Laura's Durrell and I don't know, from Alexander's time, actually. So let's switch a little bit to the culture. You are one of the most restless ambassadors, and your embassy is really, really into making events, and especially cultural events. So I would like to ask what cultural events your restless embassy prepares for 2021.
Well, I hope that restless here means that we don't take rest, and which is true. We really rarely rest when we feel that our effort produces concrete results for the friendship between two countries. And you know why I was a little bit late to our appointment, maybe today over this virtual forum, because right before we meet over this online platform, I had a visit by one of the most famous novelists. in Serbia, Madame Liliana Habjanovic-Đurović. And you know what she was bringing to me? She was bringing to me a product that is the fruit of maybe 2 years of cooperation between the Egyptian General the General Egyptian Book Organization and between her publishing house, is that we translated one of her books to Arabic and published it through the General Egyptian Book Organization. And today she gave me a gift, and that gift is this. This is a novel by Sohair al-Kalamawi, who's one of the famous Egyptian novelists, and it's been translated to Serbian. And she told me, I don't read Serbian, unfortunately, but she told me that this says that this is recommended by Liliana Habjanovic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
she has just also put the dedication for it. So this book is our newest product of cooperation. It's just out of print, and it's been translated to Serbian by the Arabic Culture Center founder, Ana Pavlovic. And this type of cultural projects is something that I'm very, very proud of, because there is no better way to get for the societies to get to know each other below the level of visiting. That's why I think that tourism is actually a cultural experience. It's not only an economic activity or so on and so forth. It's a cultural experience whereby the two people get to know each other. But if one, before the visit or after the visit, or even if one did not visit at all, the second form of interaction, or the equally impressive form of interaction, is reading a book such as this, is watching a film, is appreciating the music. And that is why this series of cultural projects is something that we are very proud of. I think this year in particular, we've done so much in the last 3 years. This is my last year in Serbia. Unfortunately, my term ends always is the case for ambassadors in 4 years, at least for Egyptian ambassadors. So we have put the seeds for cultural cooperation that will grow and continue to bear fruit in the future. This particular year, maybe I was happy and honored to meet Madame Maja Gojkovic, the new Minister of Culture and Information. And we both discussed how important it is for this year to feature the cultural aspects of the non-aligned movement, because this is 60 years from 6 years anniversary of the Belgrade Summit of 1961, and now 2021 is 6 years plus. So I'm very much hoping that a number of our cultural activities that we will organize this year, hopefully with the easing out of the COVID situation, will also feature on this link that that exists between the two countries through their leadership role in the online movement. So I'll be speaking to the Museum of Yugoslavia about a number of activities in this regard. They'll be happy to also maybe feature a number of our paintings here and a number of our cultural products. If you visit us right now downstairs at our in our conference room, you will find that it's not tidy at all, because it's full of maybe, I think, 300 or even more books. We are dividing them according to category, and we'll be happy to provide to present them as a present to the National Public Library, to the National Public Library, to the University of Belgrade, the Arabic sections, which, by the way, has is something to be proud of, because the graduates of that Arabic section are among the best students that I have seen of Arabic, with very elegant Arabic, because Arabic has more a classical form, which is very elegant, very difficult as well, and then a colloquial, more spoken one. But I'm very glad that those students of Arabic language also master the classical, beautiful Arabic Arabic that is literally Arabic. So we will be also presenting some books to them. And then finally, we had a very nice activity a week ago related to culture, related to books, which I was very happy to visit Adligat, the Museum of Book and Literature in Belgrade, and to present a book that is actually novel by the only Nobel literature laureate in the Arab world, Naguib Mahfouz. and signed by him. And you would see how you know, the feeling of excitement in the eyes of Mr. Lazic of Adligat, and how he was very happy to receive that book as a present to be included in the book. Um, the book museum that they run. I'll be happy to share a number of pictures for you of these couple of events. So there are a number of them. So that was a really nice activity that we had at Atligat, and I'll be happy to share pictures with you. So it's a book by Naguib Mahfouz, the only Nobel laureate in literature from the Arab world, signed by him, that is now in that museum. Naguib Mahfouz traveled very rarely, in fact, maybe never. One of the cities, the only city which he actually chose to travel to, was Belgrade during the non-aligned movement height. So there is that connection that that keeps his heritage very well alive in this beautiful city.
Fantastic. You told me a couple of things about the museums, and I wanted to ask you about the Grand Egyptian Museum. That seems fascinating. We had an opportunity to sneak peek last January. Actually, it was 2 years ago now. It was 2019. Can you tell us more about the project, about its location? From it, you can see the pyramids and the Sphinx. It has a very specific location. Can you just a little bit elaborate on that?
So the Grand Egyptian Museum, and the abbreviation, I think, is a very, I don't know if it's a coincidental one or if it's an intentional one, but it is, yeah, but it is very much speaks out for the value of that huge cultural project called the GEM. It's the largest cultural investment of Egypt at any time, and probably one of the largest in the world. It costs $1 billion. It's the largest museum dedicated to one civilization in the world. It will be the first time ever to exhibit and present the full collection of Tutankhamun in one place. The full collection of Tutankhamun has been exhibited before, but in segments, and hence it was difficult to reimagine, almost I would say to reincarnate Tutankhamun's life in the past. But now that the whole collection is going to be in one shared space and time, one can easily reincarnate him or herself, or reimagine him or herself in the life and the golden era of Tutankhamun. So it is situated on the Giza Plateau, and hence the proximity to the Giza pyramids and to the Sphinx site will make it possible for tourists with very tight time schedule to both have go through the ancient Egyptian civilization artifacts and antiquities as exhibited in the museum, and to visit the site of the only remaining old world wonder, which is the pyramids and the pyramids. And if you add to that, because of the proximity, one will be able to actually also watch the Sound and Light show, which is the show that starts in the evening after sunset, and tells the story of time, tells the story of civilization through illuminating those sites. And I'm happy, when we're speaking about Sound and Light show, I'm happy to say that I met last year in December at the organization, actually, of your organization and a couple of others, with the mayor of Zaychar, and we discussed about Felix Romania and how that is the only site that is registered for Serbia as the cultural heritage of UNESCO. And we discussed how the experience and the expertise of the Sound and Light show can actually be brought in to illuminate Felix Romania, and for it to be available to visitors in the evening. So this is another culture project, since we were speaking about culture project for 21, that I really hope will materialize. Can you imagine that the Felix Romania would be illuminated in the evening opening and telling the story of that beautiful site through this joint cooperation between Egypt and Serbia in this regard. So coming back to the GEM is close to the pyramids, it's close to Sphinx, it's close to the Sound and Light Show. But you know, one of the things, other thing of proximity that it's not very well known for, it's almost at the toll station, close to the toll station of the Cairo-Alexandria Highway. So easily one can visit those three sites together and then take a 2-hour drive to visit Alexandria and the sea, maybe even less than 2 hours, because this highway is now at a very high standard, and I think there's a bit of flexibility for the speed limit, at least on that part. So this new location is very, very important. Add to it one final thing I would say about location is that it's now at maybe 20-minute proximity to a new airport that is going to be opened. It's going to be open. It is actually opened, called the Sphinx Airport, which allows for, easy influx of tourism in and out to see those three sites together. So 2021 is going to be a remarkable date for the celebration of this antiquities complex, if I would call it so.
It seems like Egypt is growing infrastructurally really at amazing pace. It's really fantastic to hear how many highways, roads, museums, airports have been built during the last couple of years. And one of the wonders of the new world we live in is actually the new capital. The new capital, we saw it in 2019. It's really growing. I saw some photos. When will it be finished? When will the parts of it, if not the whole city, which is going to be huge? And did you choose the name? Finally, I asked, about the name, and they said, yeah, we have some like 4 or 5 proposals, and there's something like that, And still in Wikipedia there is this like new capital. There is nothing on the name. Can you just say to our viewers something about this really, really amazing thing that could be compared only, according to me, could be compared only to St. Petersburg by Peter the Great. Yeah. It's really amazing to make such thing.
So thanks for that question, GK. We were talking, when will it be operational? In fact, as both you and I speak now on the 26th of January of 2021, right now, there is a handball match in the first World Championship of Handball to be hosted on the African continent, taking place in that capital. So in fact, a number of features of that capital are already operational. We spoke about a number of stadiums for the handball, the World Championship of Handball that is taking place in Egypt now, but also, and I think you may have visited when you were there, Zikica, the largest Orthodox cathedral in Africa is seated there, and one of the largest also mosques in Africa is also there. So there are a number of features, there are a number of activities that are already operationalized there, with maybe a conference, a big conference center as well. But the actual movement of ministries, I think, is expected mid this year. So in fact, when I go back home after the end of my beautiful assignment in Serbia, I will have to either drive on this some of the highways to the new capital, or to actually choose to rent or get a place there. So I think mid this year, even the governmental bureaucratic a dimension of the capital is going to be functioning. Now already there have been, as we said, a number of activities in sports and in conference centers that have already been undertaking place, and as we said, the 2 religious sites. So this is a mega project that is taking place, because, as you know, Cairo is 21 million people. It has been the capital of Egypt for thousands of years. So it was time to make it relax a little bit from some of the daily activities, and for it to actually show its beauty more and more when it's relieved from being also the seat of government and the seat of government and the seat of administration. That is why, regarding your name or the question about the name, at the moment the name of that capital is administrative capital العاصمة الإدارية. And it reminds me, Jika, of something. You know, when new couples have, they're so excited about pregnancy and about the baby, and they keep on reading all these books, what to expect when you're pregnant, and so on. They choose they choose the furniture for the new baby. They choose it, and then the baby arrives, and they start to discuss. So, what is the name of that baby going to be it a boy or a girl? So we're at that phase. We're at the phase of excitement about the new capital, and the name will come with it. But you know, we have a saying in Arabic that everyone holds part of the characteristic of his or her name. Most names in Arabic are qualities. So, you know, so Sharif means noble, and Nabil also. So, you know, Karim means generous. So we always say that if you hold that name, you also reflect part of the characteristics, and that you will be born with it anyway, that the baby will be born with it anyway. So I'm almost sure that the capital will be born with its own name when the time comes. But I want to come from that to maybe a quick overview of mega projects that are taking place in Egypt at the moment, which is three new capitals: the new capital of Egypt, that is the administrative capital; the new capital of the Red Sea, called Al Jalala, which is about 200
Really?
kilometers from Hurghada; and the new capital of the Mediterranean, called Al Alamein. So those are three mega cities that are being constructed in parallel at the same time, to basically change the demographic distribution of and the even economic activity transformation in this regard. Related to that is a mega project of major highways. I think 12,000 kilometers in the last 3 or 4 years, which is an upgrade that we've never seen in our modern history, but that is very much essential for economic activity. I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a signature for the first a railway between Ain al-Sokhna, which is 300 kilometers north of Hurghada, up to Al Alamein. Again, that would allow for this port on the Red Sea to connect to the Mediterranean through this railway, the transport of goods and individuals. All this means a tremendous opportunity for Serbian businesses as well, for Serbian companies, because obviously these are taking place in Egypt, but they're not done in separately from international corporations and partnerships. So I really hope that Serbian companies discover the opportunities that this may represent, especially that January 2021, this month in which we are both, we have seen the entry into force of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is the largest free trade area in the world with 1 billion consumers. And if Serbian businesses establish a presence in Africa through the gateway of Egypt, that means that they can access 1 billion consumers directly. So I really hope that we explore together those partnerships, economic, commercial, business partnerships that emanate from those mega projects of urban development, of infrastructure, and of logistics zone. Because now we're also developing the Suez Canal for it not to be only a maritime route, which it has always been, but also for the Suez Canal to be a logistics and services hub in the region. So these mega projects offer also very promising opportunities for further cooperation between Egypt and Serbia in several regards.
Fantastic. I hope the good old times from the non-aligned movement will come back with a vengeance, and will have it even, an even higher level. The last question is about the buildings, about the building of the Egyptian embassy and the residence. So we're starting a new chapter in new section in the Diplomacy and Commerce magazine, and one of them is actually about the buildings and residences. So can you tell us something about the paintings, artwork, the building itself? I saw Robert coming to your embassy or residence and talking on Facebook about the architectural and artistic value of the building and its interior and exterior. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So these are two beautiful buildings in Senjak and Dedinje. The embassy is on Andrej Nikolić and the residence is on Tolstojeva. And I'm very, I'd like to express through you appreciation to the company which actually owns and manages those two companies, the depots, which has done a tremendous work in the last 3 years for renovating and restoring those two beautiful buildings. They're old. I think they're over 100 years old, and hence it was time to actually upgrade and to again renovate and restore. And I know it was quite difficult for me because we had to live with the, with the construction work, the noise level, the sometimes even the painting smell and the dust. But I was happy to do this for the new ambassador who will follow me and for the new team who will follow us, because it was needed. 100 years old buildings as precious as these needed that restoration. So Depots did a great work in upgrading these two beautiful buildings and preserving them for the future generations. I'm also happy to say that we are, since we are talking about the new administrative capital of Egypt, that all embassies are expected and are invited to move to this new capital. So we'll be happy to see that the Serbian embassy and residents be well featured in this new capital, and maybe also in a form of a reciprocal, agreement that the two countries would actually be owning their own premises, both in the new administrative capital and in Belgrade. So there is an opportunity for further cooperation and for further reflection between the two governments in this regard. We are. I'm very happy that the embassy is actually we have excellent neighbors. One of the neighbors is the Museum of African Arts, again, a very reputed and esteemed institution in Belgrade. We've had a great cooperation with this museum and with its director, Maria Alexic, and they hold a number of workshops for children and for even for wider audiences about Egyptology. This is where we coined the new term Egyptology with ALL, which basically means Egyptology for all. You can Google that and see some of the featured articles in this regard. So we have very good neighbors and we have excellent relations with them. The nice thing about the paintings that we have is that they're not only paintings about Egypt, but some of them are paintings by Egyptians about Serbia. And this would really also show how important this cultural interaction is, because the minute you visit the country and have a good experience in it, one tries to express that through different forms of expressions, paintings being one of them. So you would see at the embassy that we have a nice painting by Ibrahim Ghazala of a number of nice little boats. I think it was somewhere near Bela Silva. At the residence, you'd see a painting of a Serbian woman featuring traditional clothes by Lamia El Said, and this is something that I'm also trying to very much feature and preserve. It was actually part of my book that I edited called Serbia by Egyptian Eyes. It has a number of paintings by Egyptians of their experience in Serbia and how they expressed their stay here through it. So we invite you and others to come and visit us. In fact, we used to allow for the top sheeter walking tours to come in and to have and to stop by at our embassy and to taste maybe some of the Egyptian desserts. And maybe after the COVID situation, we will also be helping them organize these tours once again. But if you want to have, for example, a quick tour of those paintings, I'll be happy to share with you that the chapter from my book about it, and a number of them are actually also featured in on our social media presence, which is Egypt in Serbia, at Egypt in Serbia. It's available on Instagram, Facebook, new one on LinkedIn, just new, brand new, and Twitter. So we'd like to also be digitally present for those who are not able to visit us in person.
I will definitely visit you. I promise that. I'll make a visit with my wife, and I will check out all the artistic treasure that you have and all the sweets, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Amr. It was a great conversation with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it was the first Diplomacy Talks in this format. Amr Alguvejli, the Ambassador of Egypt, his last year in service, but he will be remembered as one of the most restless and cheerful ambassadors I've ever met. Thank you, Amr, once again.
Thank you.